There were 41 of them. Han Tae-woo knew the exact number because his aunt kept a record, written by hand in a leather notebook she carried the way other women carried rosaries. 41 formal introductions in 4 years. 41 afternoons in private tea rooms in Sogongdong and Cheongdam. 41 women in expensive coats sitting across polished tables. 41 families who had done their research and arrived with their terms already decided. The 41st was a Thursday in November. Her name was Yoo-hoon. She was 29, second daughter of a shipping family out of Incheon, educated in Geneva, and she had the specific composure of a woman who had been trained since childhood to be exactly this pleasant and exactly this uninteresting. She poured his tea before he could reach for the pot. That was the first thing. My father says the Han organization has moved a great deal of business into legitimate holdings, she said. He admires that. Your father is being polite. My father is never polite. She smiled. He's strategic. It's a different thing that looks the same from far away. It was, Tae-woo would admit later, a good line. She was intelligent. She was beautiful in the calm architectural way that photographed well. Any man in Seoul would have taken her hand and thanked whatever god he prayed to. He sat across from her for 50 minutes and felt absolutely nothing. Not dislike. Not attraction. Just the flat, gray nothing of a man reading a contract in a language he'd read too many times. When it was over, he walked out into the cold and stood on the pavement in Cheongdam while his driver brought the car around. And he thought with the first real flicker of alarm he'd felt in years. What is wrong with me? He was 41 years old. He had inherited an organization at 33 and doubled it by 38. He had buried a father, outmaneuvered 2 rival families, and put his name on 9 legitimate companies. He had done every single thing that was required of him. And he could not, apparently, do this one ordinary human thing. How was she? His aunt asked that evening, notebook already open. Fine. Fine. Han Myeong wrote something down and did not look up. You've said fine 41 times. At some point, Tae-woo, fine becomes a diagnosis. Of what? Of a man looking for something he can't describe, she said, which is very romantic in films and extremely inconvenient in a family that needs an heir. She closed the notebook. There's a woman from the Choi family in December. Please try to have a personality. The Han estate sat on a wooded slope in Songbuk-dong, behind a wall that had been rebuilt 3 times in 60 years, each time higher. 22 rooms, 9 staff, a garage with 6 cars in it, 4 of them armored. And at the back of the ground floor, past the formal dining hall nobody used, down 3 steps and around a corner, there was a kitchen. It was the only warm room in the entire house. Naomi Okonkwo had been running it for 3 years. She was 30, Nigerian-American, born in Houston to a Lagos mother who had raised her on the principle that food was the last honest language left in the world. She'd trained in Chicago, cooked in Paris for 2 brutal years, come to Seoul at 26 on a contract that was supposed to last 8 months. She had stayed for 3 years, and she could not entirely explain why, and she had stopped trying to. That night she was alone in the kitchen at 11, doing what she always did at 11. 1 pot of sialiangtang on the back burner, bone broth she'd started at 6 that morning, because in a house like this somebody always came home late, and somebody always came home damaged. The service door opened. She didn't turn around. She'd learned the sound of every door in the house. Sit down, she said. Han Tae-woo stopped in the doorway. He was in a black overcoat with the reins still on the shoulders. There was a mark on his jaw that would be a bruise by morning, and he was holding his right arm slightly wrong. And he had the specific hollow expression of a man who has spent the evening doing something he would not describe out loud. I didn't ask for anything, he said. I know. Sit down. He sat. She ladled the broth into a heavy stone bowl, added the rice and the scallion, and set it in front of him without comment. Then she turned back to the stove, put a clean towel in a bowl of ice water, wrung it out, and set that beside his hand. For your face, she said. It's nothing. Then it'll be nothing with less swelling. He picked up the towel. They didn't talk. They almost never talked. He ate and she cleaned down her station, and the extractor fan hummed, and somewhere far off in the house a clock did something quiet. This had been happening for 3 years. Not every night, but often enough that it had a shape. He came in late. She fed him. He left. He had never once said thank you in words. He had also never once, in 3 years, come home late, and gone anywhere else. When he finished, he set the bowl down and sat looking at it for a moment. Was it any good? She asked. Not fishing. She asked it the way a mechanic asks whether the noise stopped. It was the only good thing that happened today. She glanced over her shoulder. He was already standing, already reaching for his coat, already gone back behind the face he wore in every other room. Good night, Miss Okonkwo. Good night, sir. The door closed. Naomi stood at the sink for a while with her hands in the water and thought about the fact that in 3 years, she had learned this man's blood pressure from the way he held a spoon, and that he had, as far as she could tell, never learned her first name. Mrs. Jung had worked in the Han house for 31 years. She had wiped Tae-woo's face when he was 6. She had also, twice, quietly disposed of a shirt without asking any questions about it. She found Naomi at the kitchen table the next morning with a laptop open and a mug going cold beside it. You're up early. I'm always up early. Mrs. Jung looked at the screen. It took her about 2 seconds. That's an application. Naomi closed the laptop. It's a job posting. For where? Copenhagen. A pause. It's a good restaurant. 2 stars. They want a head of kitchen, and they've been asking me since spring. Mrs. Jung sat down across from her, which she almost never did. Since spring, she repeated. I keep not answering. Why? Naomi turned the mug around on the table. She was quiet for long enough that Mrs. Jung, who was 70 and had no time left for polite fictions, answered for her. Because of him. Don't. I've been in this house 31 years, Mrs. Jung said. I've watched that boy since he was small enough to hide under the counter you're leaning on. And in 31 years, I have never once seen him eat anything he didn't have to, in any room, with anybody, until you came. That's not what that is. Then what is it? Naomi looked up, and her voice, when it came, was very level and very tired. It's a man who is comfortable with me, she said, because I don't require anything of him. I feed him, and I don't ask questions, and I don't need to be introduced to anyone. I'm the one room in his life with no politics in it. She shook her head slowly. That's not affection, Mrs. Jung. That's convenience. And I've been calling it something else for about 2 years too long. Mrs. Jung was quiet. He's sitting down with the Choi family's daughter in December, Naomi said. That's number 42. Everyone in this house knows the number. She almost laughed. 42 women he's looked at properly. And I've stood 12 feet away from him at 11 o'clock at night, 3 or 4 times a week, for 3 years. She stood and picked up the cold mug. I'm not going to be a woman who waits in a kitchen, Annie. My mother didn't raise that. She rinsed the mug and set it upside down on the rack. I'm giving my notice at the end of the month. Across the city, in an office above a construction firm in Udo that laundered a great deal more than money, Han Tae-woo was reading the same notebook his sister kept. He had made a copy of it. He made copies of everything. Tae-woo was 58, and he had been passed over. That was the entire architecture of the man. When his older brother died, the organization had gone to a 33-year-old nephew instead of to him, and he had spent 8 years since being enormously, elaborately supportive about it. His man Ko sat across from him. The Choi introduction is set for the 11th, Ko said. He'll refuse. You sound certain. He's refused 41. Tae-woo closed the notebook. My nephew has a flaw, Ko, and it's a useful one. He cannot pretend. He can lie, he can kill, he can sit through a funeral for a man he had removed, but he cannot pretend to want something he doesn't want. It's the only childish thing left in him. He turned to the window, and the bylaws are very clear. If Tae-woo has not married and produced an heir by his 43rd year, the family council can call a vote of succession. He smiled slightly. 2 years. He spent for looking. He won't find it in 2. And if he does? Then whoever he chooses, Tae-woo said, becomes the most important person in Seoul for me to understand. It went wrong on a Tuesday. A shipment inspection in Incheon that turned out to be an ambush. 3 of Tae-woo's men hurt, 1 badly, and Tae-woo himself put through a stack of pallets by a man who was significantly larger than him and significantly slower. He came home at 2 in the morning with 4 cracked ribs and blood on his shirt cuff that wasn't his. The kitchen light was on. Naomi looked up when he came through the door, and for the first time in 3 years, she stopped what she was doing entirely. Sit, she said. I'm fine. Han Tae-woo, sit down. He sat. partly because his ribs made it non-optional, partly because she had used his name, all of it, out loud, which she had never done. She did not ask what happened. She went to the cupboard, took down the box she kept behind the flour, and set out gauze and antiseptic and a compression wrap on the steel counter. Coat off. Miss Okonkwo. Off. He got the coat off. Then the shirt, with difficulty. The bruising down his left side was already going the color of a storm front. She worked in silence. Her hands were steady and impersonal and warm, and he sat very still and looked at the wall and did not breathe more than he had to. Two of these are cracked, not broken, she said. You'll know the difference in about 6 hours. If you can't get a full breath in by morning, you go to Dr. Sim, and I don't care what it costs you politically. How do you know the difference? My mother was an ER nurse for 22 years in Houston. She pulled the wrap tight, and he made a sound he immediately regretted. I've been setting people back together since I was 9. Cooking was the part one chose. She fastened the wrap and stepped back. Han Tae-woo, sitting shirtless and taped in his own kitchen at 2 in the morning, with a woman he had employed for 3 years and had never once asked a single question about, heard himself say didn't know that. No, Naomi said. You didn't. There was nothing sharp in the way she said it. That was what made it land. She turned to the stove, put the pot on, and started making him something to eat, because it was 2 in the morning and he had lost blood, and that was what you did. Behind her, he said, What is your first name? Her hand stopped over the pot for exactly 1 second. Then she went on. It's Naomi, she said. Naomi. Yes. How long have you worked here? 3 years and 4 months. He was quiet for a moment. And I've never asked. No. Why did you never say anything? She set the spoon down and turned around, and she leaned back against the counter and folded her arms, and she looked at him with an expression he had never seen on anyone in that house. Not fear, not deference, not calculation. Just plain, unarmored honesty. Because you're not a man people correct, she said. And because I decided a long time ago that if I was going to be invisible here, I'd at least be useful. She held his gaze. But you asked. So there it is. The extractor fan hummed. Han Tae-woo, who had sat across from 41 women in tea rooms and felt nothing at all, sat in his own kitchen with cracked ribs and looked at a woman he saw 4 nights a week and felt something arrive in his chest with the force of a door being kicked in. Oh, he thought. Oh no. If this story has you, take 1 second right now to like the video and subscribe to the channel. What he does in the next 10 minutes is the whole reason this story exists. Now let's keep going. He didn't sleep. He lay in a dark room on the 2nd floor with his ribs screaming and did the thing he had been trained since childhood never to do, which was look backwards. 3 years. The night his father's oldest friend betrayed him, and he came home at 4 in the morning, and there was rice porridge, still warm, and nobody had told her he was coming. The winter he had pneumonia and refused a hospital, and someone had left ginger and pear on his desk every morning for 11 days, and he had assumed it was Mrs. Young. The day he came back from his mother's memorial and could not speak to anyone, and he had gone down 3 steps and around a corner and sat in a kitchen for 2 hours while a woman worked around him and said absolutely nothing at all. 41 tea rooms. And a woman standing 12 feet away, for nights a week, for 3 years, whose first name he had learned that night. He got up at 6. He went down to the kitchen because he did not have a plan, and it was the only place in the house where he had ever had a clear thought. The kitchen was empty. There was an envelope propped against the flour tin, with his name on it in careful handwriting. He opened it standing up. It was a resignation letter. Formal, correct, dated for the end of the month. 30 days notice. A line thanking him for 3 years of employment. A line offering to train a replacement. And at the bottom, below the signature, one handwritten sentence that had clearly not been part of the draft. I hope you find her. You deserve to stop looking. Han Tae-woo stood in his own kitchen holding a piece of paper and understood, with the total clarity of a man who had run out of time, that he had spent 4 years and 41 afternoons conducting a search for a woman who had been standing at his stove the entire time. He found her in the herb garden behind the service wing, cutting perilla in the cold with her coat over her apron. She saw him coming and straightened. You read it. I read it. It's 30 days. That's more than the contract requires. I'll have the whole kitchen documented before I... Naomi. She stopped. He had not planned a single word of what he said next. and it showed. And that was the only reason she believed it. I have sat across a table from 41 women in 4 years, he said. My aunt keeps a notebook. I know the number. And I have spent that entire time trying to find someone I could stand to have breakfast with for 30 years, and I could not do it. And I decided the problem was that I was broken. The wind moved through the garden. The problem was that I already had it, he said. I had it at 11 o'clock at night 4 times a week, and I never once looked up. Naomi stood very still with the scissors in her hand. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't do this because I'm leaving. Her voice was steady, but there was something under it now. Because that's not love, Tae-woo, that's panic. That's a man realizing the furniture's being moved. I have watched you not see me for 3 years, and I made my peace with it, and I found a door, and I'm walking through it, and I need you not to stand in it for the wrong reason. That's fair. I know it's fair. It's also not what this is. How would you know? She said. You didn't know my name yesterday. That landed. He took it. You're right, he said. So I'm not going to ask you for anything. I'm not going to ask you to stay, or to withdraw that letter, or to answer me today. Then what are you doing? I'm asking you to have dinner with me, he said. Once. Somewhere that isn't this house. Where you don't cook and I don't eat standing up and nobody in the room works for me. He paused. And if at the end of it you still want Copenhagen, I will write the reference myself, and I will not say another word about it for the rest of my life. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. You're a very dangerous man, she said. And that was a very ordinary thing to ask. I'm aware. Good. She turned back to the perilla. Because ordinary is the only thing I've ever actually wanted from you. She cut 2 more stems. Saturday, she said, without looking up. And I picked the restaurant, because you have terrible taste, and everyone in this house is too frightened to tell you. Not the dinner, the second one, and the third, and the fact that the Choi introduction on the 11th had been cancelled by Tae-woo personally, with an apology so gracious it insulted everyone involved. And then the detail that made him put down his cup. He's been going to her flat, Ko said, in Yeonam-dong. She moved out of the staff wing 11 days ago. He goes alone. No car detail past the corner. Alone. 2 men, and they stay in the street. Gi Chul sat back. Who is she? Naomi Okonkwo. American. Nigerian family. 30. She's been the estate cook for 3 years. Nobody. No family in Korea, no connections, no leverage, no protection. Ko hesitated. That's what's remarkable about it, sir. There's no advantage in her at all. No, Gi Chul said slowly. There isn't. Which means he isn't doing it for advantage. He stood and went to the window. 8 years he had waited. 2 years left on the succession clause, and his nephew was about to close it. Not with a Choi or a Yu or any family the council could object to, but with a foreign woman with no name, which the council would object to loudly, which meant Tae-woo would have to fight for her, which meant he would fight and win and be stronger afterwards, because a man who fights his own council for something and wins is a man nobody challenges twice. He'll do it, Gi Chul said. He'll marry her. He'll take the council apart to do it. Sir, unless she leaves first. He turned around. She had a resignation letter in, didn't she? Copenhagen. He smiled. Find out what the offer was, and then find out what it would take to make her take it. They came to her on a Tuesday, at the restaurant she'd started consulting for in Mapo, 2 men in good coats who bought coffee and waited until her shift ended. The older one was courteous. That was the frightening part. Miss Okonkwo, my employer admires your position enormously. I don't have a position. You have the only one that matters. He set a folder on the table. Copenhagen has been improved. Head of kitchen becomes partner. Equity, relocation, a 5-year guarantee. Signed and funded. It's yours on Thursday if you want it. Naomi didn't touch the folder. And the condition. You board the flight, and you don't say goodbye. That's it. That's it. He folded his hands. You should understand that this is the generous version of this conversation. There's a less generous version, and I have no appetite for it. I'm 61 years old, and I'd like to retire without any more of those in my memory. Naomi looked at the folder for a long moment. Then she said, Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you know what he eats when he's been hurt? The man blinked. I'm sorry. Oxbone broth. 12 hours. No salt in it. Because he can't taste salt properly for about a day afterwards. I don't know why. I've never asked a doctor. And he holds the spoon in his left hand when his right shoulder's been wrenched, and he thinks nobody notices. She looked up. I've known that for 3 years. Your employer's known him for 58, and I'd bet the entire folder he doesn't. She stood up and put her coat on. You can tell whoever sent you that I've been invisible in that house for 3 years, and I never once used it against him. She picked up her bag. That's the difference between me and every person he's related to. And you can tell him I said that in exactly those words. She was 2 streets away before her hands started shaking. She got them still. Then she took out her phone and called Tae-woo and said 4 words. Your uncle found me. The family council met in a room in Pyeongchang-dong with a table long enough for 18 and a ceiling designed to make people speak quietly. 11 men, 2 women. His aunt with her notebook. His uncle 3 seats down on the left, entirely relaxed. Tae-woo stood at the head of the table and did not sit. I'm going to say 3 things, he said. And then I'm going to take questions, and then this matter will be closed permanently. Tae-woo, someone began. Permanently, he repeated, pleasantly, and the room went quiet. First, I'm going to marry Naomi Okonkwo. I've asked her. She hasn't answered yet, because she's a serious person and this is a serious thing, and when she does answer it will be her decision and not this table's. Movement around the room. He let it happen. Second, I know what the objections are, so I'll save you the trouble of dressing them up. She's not Korean. She's not from a family that brings us anything. She's been an employee in my house, and several of you are going to say the word appropriate at some point in the next 10 minutes, and I want you to hear yourselves say it in advance. Silence. Third, he put both hands on the table. The succession clause gives me until my 43rd year. Some of you have been counting. One of you has been counting out loud. He did not look at his uncle. That was worse. I've spent 4 years being introduced to daughters of families who wanted a merger and called it a marriage. 41 of them. And every one of you told me that was what strength looked like. He straightened. I've since learned what it actually looks like. It looks like a woman who was offered a great deal of money by someone at this table to leave the country quietly, and who said no, and who then called me instead of taking it, when she had every reason not to, because this family has never given her a single thing except a paycheck and a service entrance. The room had gone very still. Han Ji-chul's face had not changed at all. Uncle, Tae-woo said. Anything to add? You have no proof of that. I have a folder, a bank instruction, and a 61-year-old man who would very much like to retire. Tae-woo tilted his head. But I'm not going to use it today. I'd rather you sat in this room for the rest of your life knowing I could. He picked up his coat. The matter's closed. Aunt Miriam, you can throw the notebook away. She was already writing something in it. I'm not throwing it away, she said, without looking up. I'm writing the 42nd name. There should be a record of the one that worked. He came to Yeonam-dong that night, alone, up 4 flights with rain on his shoulders. Naomi opened the door in a t-shirt and an apron with flour on it. You're early. The meeting ended early. That's ominous. It was. She let him in. The flat was small and warm and smelled like something braising, and there was a stack of boxes by the wall, still there, still not unpacked, and still not sealed either. A decision held open with both hands. She went back to the counter. He stood in the doorway. You told them, she said. I told them. And it's finished. All of it. The introductions, the clause, my uncle. He paused. He'll be alive and he'll be unimportant, which for a man like him is worse. Naomi kept working. You still haven't answered me, he said. I know. I'm not rushing you. I know that too. She set the knife down and turned around, and she wiped her hands on the apron and looked at him across a very small kitchen. Can I tell you the part I've been stuck on? Please. It's not the danger. I knew what house I was working in from the first week. I'm not going to pretend to discover it now. She folded her arms. It's that I spent 3 years being the most useful person in your life and completely invisible in it. And I need to know that what changed isn't that you finally saw me. It's that you'll keep looking. Because a man can notice something once. Anybody can do that. Noticing the same person every day for 30 years, when they've stopped being new. That's the whole job, Tae-woo. That's the only part that's actually hard. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, your mother was an ER nurse in Houston for 22 years. You were 9 the first time you set a broken finger. You cooked in Paris for 2 years and you don't talk about it, which means it was bad. You hum when you're braising and not when you're baking. You take your coffee with too much sugar and you're embarrassed about it, which is why you drink it before anyone's awake. Naomi's arms came uncrossed. You've been buying the perilla from the same woman at the Gyeongdong market for 3 years because she throws in the stems, he said. You keep the medical box behind the flour so nobody has to ask you for it out loud. And you cried in the pantry on the 11th of March last year and told Mrs. Young it was onions, and it wasn't onions, and I have never asked you about it, and I'm not asking you now. He stopped. 11 days, he said. That's what I've learned in 11 days of actually paying attention. I'm aware it doesn't make up for 3 years. I'm telling you so you know what I'm capable of when I bother. The rain went on against the window. Naomi Okonkwo stood in her own kitchen with flour on her hands and looked at the most dangerous man in Songbuk-dong, who had come up 4 flights of stairs alone in the rain to recite her coffee order. March 11th was my father's birthday, she said. He died the year before I came here. I know. I didn't. Thank you for telling me. That's the right answer. Is it the answer to the other thing? She almost smiled. She picked up the knife again and turned back to the board, and for a second he thought that was all he was going to get. Then she said, There's a box by the wall with my knife roll in it. It's the only one I actually packed properly. I saw it. If I were going to Copenhagen, she said, that box would have been sealed in October. She glanced back over her shoulder. Sit down, Tae-woo. You've been standing in doorways your whole life. And Han Tae-woo, 41 years old, for years and 41 introductions and 1 resignation letter later, sat down at a small table in a small flat in Yeonam-dong, in the only kind of room he had ever actually wanted, and let a woman he had finally learned to see put a bowl in front of him. Nothing was solved. His uncle was still alive and still counting. The council would smile at the wedding and talk in the car afterwards. There were people in that city who would spend years trying to find out what Naomi Okonkwo was worth, and she would have to learn a whole language of caution she had never needed before. And she had not, technically, said yes. Not that night. But the boxes stayed by the wall, unsealed, for another 2 weeks. And then one morning in January, Mrs. Young came down to the kitchen at the estate and found the medical box back behind the flour tin and a pot of bone broth on the back burner that somebody had started at 6. She stood there for a moment, 70 years old, in a house she'd given her whole life to. Then she put the kettle on and didn't say a word to anybody about it, because some things you don't announce. Some things you just let be true. So tell me what you think. Should Naomi have said yes? Or did he need to earn more than 11 days of paying attention? Was Seoul finished? Or is a humiliated man in that family more dangerous than an ambitious one? And when the council smiles at that wedding, who moves first? Drop it in the comments. Tell me what city you're watching from. And if this one got you, like the video and subscribe, because part 2 is coming, and in that family, nobody stays closed permanently.